Incubus Make Yourself was one of the first albums I can remember buying when I was just 13 years old. After my first listen of the entire album, it cemented a lifelong love of the band, and in particular a love of Mike Einziger's excellent and often underrated guitar playing. In this video I'm going to talk about the gear that Mike was using at this time, the studio that the album was recorded at, and in the final part of the video I'll go through how I went about recreating this wonderful sound. So let's all travel back to 1999 and take a look at what Mike was using in his rig. At this time in Incubus's career, Mike was a big ambassador of PRS guitars. While recording Make Yourself, there could have been a number of guitars used. There were two solid body guitars that I could find, a greenish one and the silver sparkle that is seen during lots of live performances and the video for Pardon Me. I believe both these guitars were custom 24s, but I'm not 100% sure on that. My best guess at pickups that may have been used in these guitars is a Seymour Duncan JB in the bridge, and possibly a Seymour Duncan Jazz or 59 in the neck. This is purely an educated guess though, as every custom 24 I have seen on second-hand sites online show the pickups are always uncovered, and on Mike's guitars they have nickel covers. This is what is making me suspect that they may have been a third-party manufacturer like Seymour Duncan. Mike would have also had his PRS from the Science days, and I would guess this guitar would be using the stock PRS pickups, so the HFS in the bridge and vintage bass in the neck. I don't think there are Seymour Duncans in this guitar, as you would be able to see the Seymour Duncan branding on the pickups themselves, which aren't visible in this picture. Following the solid body guitars, we have two hollow body guitars. One is a thicker all-spruce archtop that we can see in the Incubus Volume 2 DVD, and the other is a hollow body 2 that we see in the video for Drive. These two guitars would go on to be instrumental for the Morning View record, and I would guess these guitars had JBs in the bridges and a Jazz in the neck, or the hollow body 2 may have had a 59 in the neck. The only pickup I'm absolutely certain about is the Jazz in the archtop, as I have had that confirmed in my video all about Morning View's guitar tone by someone that actually owns one of Mike's old archtops. I have no idea if all of these guitars were used on the recording of Make Yourself. They are just the guitars I have spotted while researching for this video. There is also one other guitar that may have been used, and that's a good old Fender Strat, and I believe it was used on the intro and verses to the song Stellar. I will go into more detail about this when I get to my recreation. For amplifiers, Mike was using Mesa Boogie Tremor Verb heads and not the combos at this time. One would have been set on clean and the other to modern high gain, and he paired these with Mesa oversized 4x12 cabinets, and from looking at old live footage and the Pardon Me video, I think these were the slanted versions. Again, I'm not 100% on that, because sometimes they do look straight, sometimes they look slanted, so the slanted is my best guess. Both these speaker cabinets would have used Celestion Vintage 30 speakers. Now Mike is famous for having a large pedal board, and on Make Yourself he certainly ramped up the effects use. Let's take a look at his signal chain. He starts with a Hughes & Kettner Rotosphere before going into two Boss PH2 super phasers. From here he goes into a DoD Gonculator, then into a Boss RV3 delay and reverb. After the delay the signal goes into an MXR Phase 90 before going into a Dodd Effects 25B envelope filter, then into a Boss CS3 compressor, and finally ending in a Boss OC2 octave pedal before going to the input of the Tremor Verb heads. Now this setup would have been what he was using live during the touring cycle for Make Yourself. However, on the record there is a ton of flanger used. It can be heard on Consequence, Stellar, the song Make Yourself, Clean, I Miss You and Pardon Me. That's almost half the record, and yet Mike chose not to add the flanger to his board when playing live. I guess this is because the PH2s do a good enough job of mimicking the sound of a flanger, especially as I believe Mike used a Boss BF2 and set the manual to a fast delay time, which actually is more phaser sounding than a traditional flanger kind of sound. I will go into more detail about what pedals were used and their settings later in the video when I show you my attempt at recreating these tones. Make Yourself was recorded at NRG in Los Angeles, and on rewatching the Incubus Volume 2 DVD, it looks like they recorded in Studio A. There is a great video on YouTube by Produce Like a Pro that has a tour of NRG with one of their engineers. They talk about where the drums are usually set up.
But it's a fantastic live room. Drums we put over here.
Yep.
Per Kyle's recommendation.
That way, facing this way is the spot.
which is in the same position as how Jose seemed to have his kit from the DVD footage. They also go on to talk about how the guitar and bass are usually recorded in the ISO rooms off the live room. This is probably exactly how the band recorded Make Yourself, and just like when I was trying to recreate the Morning View tone, I ran into problems with the heavier choruses, as it seems there is a lot of room sound that enters when things get heavy. My best guess is they had the doors open to let the bass and guitar bleed into the live room and captured that all through the drum overheads, or a dedicated room mic plus the overheads. That is my best guess anyway. Looking on NRG's website, we can also see the gear list for Studio A. The desk that everything was tracked on was a Neve 8068, and this has Neve 31102 preamps. They have a bunch of different compressors too, and the 1176 stuck out to me as one to try on my attempt, as the whole of Make Yourself's clean guitar tone sounds fairly compressed. I'm guessing at this time the band would have tracked on analog tape and then transferred this to Pro Tools, so in my recreation I made sure to add a tape emulation plugin to add some more compression and tape saturation. I believe the album was also mixed at NRG in Studio C, and this would have been on an SSL 9000J console. I also found a really interesting article on the Grammys website that is interviewing the guys about Make Yourself for the 20th anniversary of the album. There is a great section titled Making Make Yourself. In summary, the band started recording Make Yourself with Jim Wirt, who produced Science. This wasn't going so well, so Incubus decided to experiment with not having a producer and just kept the engineer, who I believe was Michael Elvis Basquette, and so with his help, the band recorded everything themselves. It wasn't until later that Mike managed to get Scott Litt to come to the studio and see what they were doing, and eventually Scott helped mix the record, and as Brandon puts it, we definitely got a real sonic boost when he came on board. For my attempt, I have somewhat similar gear to what Mike was using at this time. For my guitar, I used my PRS SE Hollowbody 2 that has a Seymour Duncan Jazz in the neck, and the bridge pickup is just the stock pickup that came with the guitar. Amp-wise, I own a Mesa Boogie Tremorverb, but mine is the combo version. I use my 2 Notes Captor X to disconnect the speakers in the combo so I can run the preamp signal straight into my audio interface. In my DAW, I'm using the Miko 2 plugin by ML Sound Lab for my cabinet. And within this I'm using the Mega 4x12 original. This is based on a slanted Mesa oversized 4x12 with early original spec 70-watt Celestion V30s. That is a mouthful. I'm using just one SM57 as the microphone, and this is positioned a little bit off the dust cap to tame some of the higher frequencies. I have my Tremorverb set on clean for the first channel, and my settings are gain. This varies from song to song, but mostly set around 9 to 10 o'clock. The treble is at 12:30. The mid is just back from 12 o'clock. Bass is at 12 o'clock, and presence is just back from 12 o'clock. For channel 2, I have this set on modern high gain, and my settings are gain at 2 o'clock, treble at 1 o'clock, mid at 11:30, bass at 12 o'clock, and presence at 11 o'clock. I also have a very similar pedal board to Mike, so let me take you through my setup. Right, so here we are with my pedal board. Now, I start a little bit differently from Mike. I actually start with this Big Boss pedal, which is just a volume pedal. Now, for those of you that know the modifications that I've done to my PRS SE Hollowbody 2, I have essentially turned one of the volumes into a master volume so I can blend the piezo signal in with the magnetic pickups if I wish, and then just control all of that from one master volume. Now, because Mike likes to do a lot of volume swells and things in songs, I keep wearing those pots out because it's basically a pot stacked on a pot. So instead of having to change pots all the time, I'm just going into a volume pot for now, just that I can do volume swells without the signal crackling or anything like that. Then from there, I'm going over to my Strymon Lex, which is what I'm using instead of the Rotosphere. Then I go into my PH2 Super Phaser. Now I do have 2 of these pedals. You can see there's a bit of a gap here. My other pedal is acting up at the moment, so that is being looked at the moment to see if we can try and fix that. Then I go into my DoD Gonculator. This is the reissue version. Then we're going over to the Holy Grail Nano pedal. Now, I don't actually use this in any of the examples. The signal is just flowing through this. This doesn't get turned on at any point. Then we jump over to the Boss RV3, the digital delay and reverb. Then we're going into the MXR Phase 90. Then into the DoD Effects 25B envelope filter, then into my compressor, which is a Fender the Benz. Then we're going into the Boss BF2 flanger, and then this is a new addition for me. This is the Boss OC2. I used to have one of these a very long time ago and stupidly sold it, and I've recently just bought it again. I've used this instead of where my whammy used to be over here. In my testing, the octave down on the whammy just did not sound right at all for songs like When It Comes and things like that. So I bought one of these, and you'll hear the comparison in a little bit when I go through how I try to recreate the songs. And then from this pedal, that is what would then be going to the input of my Tremorverb. I've also upgraded my power supplies on here, so everything is coming from over here, the Strymon Zoomer. And then we've got the Ojai or Ojai little expansions on that. On this one and the zoomer, I can change the voltage as well. So a couple of these pedals, like the flanger and my other super phaser, actually use 12 volt power instead of 9 volt. So I've got those selected on there, so they're getting the right power. Before I just had this all sort of daisy chained together, these work fine like that, but it's nice to have dedicated power to them now, and the zoomer can do that as well. Over here with the real echo and the wah pedal, nothing is plugged into those at the moment, although for Make Yourself, if you wanted to play along to Battlestar Scratch Lactica, then Mike is using a wah pedal on that song, but I haven't used it in the examples that are coming up. So that is everything on my pedal board. Now let's get back to the video. Now let's jump into my DAW and I'll show some examples and exactly what I did to try and recreate these tones. Right, so here we are in my DAW. Let's first talk about the very first song on Make Yourself, which is of course Privilege. Now, before I go through what I've done on each track here, I'm just going to take you down to the master track, and for every song that's coming up that I'm going to show, I have added a bit of compression basically to try and keep everything glued together a little bit better. So this is a free plugin by Analog Obsession, basically mimicking an SSL bus compressor. So when this is on, it's doing about 2 to 3 dB of compression. It's not a lot. And then I've just got a limiter on here, which is just limiting it going too loud, essentially. So it's not going to clip anything, but it's not really pushing anything. It's just stopping it from overly clipping. So that will be on every single track. Now, in terms of what I've done here, so we can see the Miko 2 is on. We're just off the dust cap. I'm on the Mega 4x12 original. This is straight on the grill cloth, so it's as close to the cabinet as it physically can be. Then I'm going into another free plugin, which is by Analog Obsession again, which mimics a Neve 1073 preamp. So not quite the same as what was on the desk in NRG, but kind of, it gives enough of that sort of flavor. I played around with using the 1176 compressor on this, but I didn't feel like it really added anything. This is quite a crunchy sound to start with. Then I've got an SSL channel strip by Waves. I'm just cutting some of the high frequencies here at 12K, not doing anything in the high frequencies, not doing anything in the high mid frequencies, not doing anything in the low mids, and I'm not doing anything in the low frequencies either. This is more just to have the flavor of this and to cut out some of those high frequencies, because I found just using a digital EQ and dipping some of the lows and some of the mid-range here, about 400 Hertz, was much easier to be a bit more accurate than what I could do on the SSL channel strip. I was kind of chasing my tail a lot there. And then I'm just boosting a little bit at 1.87 kilohertz, as that was kind of lacking in my guitar tone for some reason. Then I've got the oxide tape from Universal Audio, and I'm pushing the input quite a bit just to get some nice tape saturation, which I think is a big part of the intro sound for Privilege. And then the output is just bang on the 0, so I'm not pushing that anymore because this saturation makes everything a lot louder anyway. Here, this is my EQ that I use to kind of try and match the sound, which is why I could be a bit more accurate with the digital EQ, trying to cut these frequencies around here. You can see around 400K, this dip, and then some of the lows as well. Now, what you'll hear in a second when I compare them is I was on my neck pickup. If you're on the bridge pickup, it's way too thin. I think he was definitely on a neck pickup for this. And I imagine he used one of the custom 24s, the solid bodies. And I believe on the PRSs, so my SE Hollow Body 2 is just a 22 fret model. And that means my neck pickup is shifted further down towards the neck. So I might get a bit more bass response than what was done on his guitar. So I believe because the necks are longer on obviously a 24 fret model, that then pushes the neck pickup back slightly, and that creates more treble and less bass. So the more you shift something towards the bridge of a guitar, the less bass you have and the more treble that it introduces. So I was finding I was having to cut a lot of low and mid-range because it would just build up massively in those areas. In terms of my amp, that is still on the clean channel. When I first got this amplifier, I thought it was the vintage high gain, which was the sound for the intro for Privilege. But I'll do a comparison in a minute and you'll hear that I'm pretty sure it's just the clean channel, but I had it pushed at about 1 o'clock, sort of 12:30 to 1 o'clock on the gain. And that is what creates that nice kind of crunchy sound coupled with the saturation from the tape. And I actually added a bit more in the Brit channel here as well. So I'm pushing that gain up to about 10 dB. So that's adding some more saturation as well. So let's have a listen. So mine might be maybe a little bit too saturated. I might back this down a little bit. And let's compare them again. So here's mine to start, and then I'll flip to Mike's. So his has still got this like nice low mid growl to it that I can't really replicate perfectly. It's pretty close, I'm pretty happy with it, but there's this really nice low mid growl and thump that he gets. Anyway, that is my best attempt at the intro for it. I actually had to go with my Ibanez just to see what a completely different guitar would sound like. Now my Ibanez does have 24 frets, but obviously is constructed completely differently and has a very different pickup in the neck as well. Here's how that sounds. It's not a million miles away, but again, it loses that sort of growliness in the low mids again. This pickup is a lot more bass heavy than even my PRS hollow body there. If you have a completely different guitar, you can probably get in a good ballpark, if obviously you have the same amplifier and things like that, by just pushing that gain up and using your neck pickup. The other advantage that the PRS has is that just like in the Morning View era, Mike plays really, really close to the bridge, and that's where you get that really percussive kind of sound, that tactile almost sound of it right at the bridge, which I can't really do on my Ibanez either because the volume control gets in the way and it's a completely different type of bridge. It's a floating bridge and all that kind of stuff. So I was having to play more in the middle of the strings, which is then probably adding more bass into it compared to playing right at the bridge like I was on the PRS. Then let's go over to the vintage high gain and have a listen to that. So you can hear it loses some clarity on that one. It's not quite, it's almost too overdriven. And I think I had the gain backed off at about 12 o'clock on the vintage high gain. It just doesn't sound as clear, which is why I'm pretty confident it would have just been on the clean channel and the clean channel's just pushed up a little bit higher to get that sound. So from there, let's go into the chorus. I don't know about you, but on my monitors here, when my track is playing, it sounds okay. It sounds pretty passable. As soon as I flip over to the actual track, you can hear what I was talking about previously in the video of that room sound just coming in and everything just goes bah in your face. And I just can't replicate it. I've tried my best. I have these room channels over here, which I am using this Music Club reverb kind of emulation or room sound emulation. And then I'm absolutely smashing that with the 1176. So that is being compressed to absolute hell. And then I've got a high pass and a low pass going on as well. So I'm cutting the real lows and some of the real highs. I kind of done that on both channels here. You can see it's kind of the same setup. And this, I'm actually boosting some of the highs to try and get some of that gnarly kind of 3 to 4K hiss and crash and just noise that's going on, really. The problem I have is the program I use, which is called Moises, which strips out these tracks for me. It does a good job of stripping out guitar and bass and drums and all that stuff, but it does lump the bass in with the guitar and in with the high-end stuff of the guitar in with the drums and things like that. So it strips out all of that noise, essentially, that we kind of want for this sound to give it that life, to make it sound like it was recorded in a big room. Now, I have put so you'll see here the drums, we've got a drum reverb right and left. So all I'm doing on here is delaying the signal to, I'm not actually delaying that one, but on the others, like I've done it on the bass reverb left and right. So these are delayed ever so slightly to make it seem like they're in different parts of the room. But the main problem is where it's taking some of those frequencies out, the drums, you just kind of lose that cymbal wash. So because of that, you don't get that same energy and that same power that the track has, essentially. So if we listen to it again, we just lose all of that, the real, like all the cymbals crashing around, the high end of the guitar that's adding to those cymbals. And I can hear some real growl in the bass as well that's just being chopped out, basically. But let's just go through and I'll show you what I've done. So all of these things are going to these room left and rights. You can actually hear what the rooms sound like. So it kind of gives it a bit of life, but it's not the same energy that you can hear in the actual track. So again, I tried this with my Ibanez over here, which is where I was just getting myself confused. I didn't realize why I had 2 heavy folders. So let me get rid of that. So this is the heavy folder that my PRS tracks are going through. And you can see that's absolutely bashing the tape already, and I'm hardly putting any input into that. It's got a bit of an EQ bump in sort of the mid-range there, and then this is what I was using to kind of gauge where I am at tone-wise to see if I'm close or anything. Then on the individual tracks, I've got the same thing again. I've got my Miko 2. This is the one that I was using to start with, which is the straight cabinet, which I just prefer the sound of the slanted. I think it gives a better response. You can see these graphs change depending on the cabinet and the speakers, which is really cool and quite helpful to give you a visual representation of what is going on. Then I've got the Analog Obsession again. I'm having to push up some 110 on this. Again, I think it's where the bass has kind of got chopped out. So I'm having to put it in the guitar, which is not ideal, to give it more of a weight to it. And then I'm adding a little bit of saturation on there again. SSL channel, I'm pushing up some of the 2K at quite a narrow bandwidth, just to give some more of that harsher sort of frequencies coming out of it. I'm dipping some at, again, in the mid-range at 40 hertz, and that's on a fairly tight bandwidth again, taking some of that out. And then again, I've just got individual channels that I'm trying to match here. So I'm not using the tone match software on anything. I'm just trying to do it myself with EQs and the gear that I have to try and get as close as possible. And then it's the same story on the right hand side, really, exactly the same kind of stuff. Except this time I'm pushing maybe a bit more in the 2K area and then dipping the same amount, and then I'm not doing anything with the lows, and then again having to raise up some of the 110 hertz there just to get a bit more weight in the low end. I've got a bit more of a bump at 1K here as well. So these the digital EQs here, where I'm trying to mimic a room sound essentially, so I'm having to add in, you know, these stranger frequencies into it to try and even get it close into the ballpark. Then if I mute that one and we'll have a listen to the Ibanez version. That sounds maybe a bit more low, mid, heavy. Again, it doesn't have that real high end to it. Where I've got it very much left and right, I can hear so much going on in the center area that kind of just gets lost with my version compared to the actual studio recording. Again, I don't know if it's just they were just using the drum overheads. From the Volume 2 DVD, when I was kind of going through it frame by frame, you could see Jose's kit set up with the overheads, and it looks like there's another room mic just in front of that drum kit as well. So I wonder if that's what's picking up kind of maybe dead in the center to fill in that gap, which I've kind of got created because it's almost split too much in the stereo field. There's nothing really going on in the middle to give it that 3D-ness that the actual studio recording has. So that's kind of it for Privilege. Those are my two examples that I tried to replicate. There's not a whole lot else going on in this song. There's not loads of crazy effects or anything else. So let's move on to the next one. Right, let's move on to Nowhere Fast. And already the intro has completely scuppered me on this one. I have no idea how they recorded this. Mine doesn't sound anything like it whatsoever. Now the intro I know uses a phase 90, and I had it set at about bang on 12 o'clock to get that real nice swirling kind of sound. Let's just have a quick listen to this from the track first. So I have no idea how they got that sound. It sounds like two guitars, but they are so well lined up together that I wonder if it's just one performance. I just don't know. I just don't know how they've got it. So if we listen to the track again, you can hear it. There's a real swirling kind of sound that goes on, and then it cuts off abruptly. So see if you can hear it. So that first da-na-na-na-na-na-na, you can hear it really pulsing, like wow, wow, really swirling around. And then the other guitar that sounds more like my one that I've recorded carries on the whole rest of the riff. Have a listen again. Back in. Ow. I have no idea how they did that. It's very cool. I don't know if it's a different guitar. I have a vague recollection that Mike's brother, Ben, played on this track. So I don't know if he's playing alongside with this, or they did one take of it and again used a room mic set up somewhere else that's just capturing more of the swirl of the phase 90. No idea. I'd love to find out how they did that one. If anybody knows out there, or if anybody happened to work on this and knows what's going on, that would be really cool to find out. Have a listen to my one again. Can't get anywhere near that. No idea how that was done whatsoever. I had a go with my Strat here as well. That doesn't sound right to me either, so I don't know what they did there. This time round, when it gets heavy, I haven't bothered with actually, even though I've got room sounds set up, I haven't actually used it on here. I have just EQ'd them instead, and it's kind of the same deal. So here's my blueprint that I was going with, and then just the tape emulation on there as well on the whole group. Then left and right, same speaker setup, same with the Brit channel, again just adding a little tiny bit of saturation, not doing anything else. I've got a high pass here and a low pass, boosting up again some around 2K, and then again cutting some of that mid-range and some of the lows here as well. And then on the right hand side, it's pretty much the same story. Miko 2, these plugins, and yeah, you could see same sort of thing going on this side as well. So let's have a listen to how this sounds. My guitar first. So I feel that's a bit closer, I might almost have a bit too much high end in my sound there. I still feel like something's missing in the middle channel though. Again, mine's very separated compared to the main studio track. So whether they blended in a smaller amount of that room sound, it doesn't sound quite as intense as Privilege did. It's still present, I feel, but not quite as much as in Privilege. And then when we go over to the verse, let's have a listen to my guitar first.
Will I ever get to where it is that I am going? Will I ever follow through with what I had planned? I guess it's possible that I have been a bit distracted, and the directions for me are a lot less indeed, man. Indeed, man. Will I come
Brandon's voice, man, it's so good. So I feel that's pretty close. On this, let me grab my notes here. I've got a ton of notes of what I did on what song. So the delay I had, this is on my RV3, the balance was at 9 o'clock, feedback was just back from 12 o'clock, delay time is at 2 o'clock, which is pointing at the number 7 on the mode dial, and that is on mode 2. And then for the PH2 I've got on that as well, that was probably, I'm trying to remember now because I didn't write that one down, which was a bit stupid, rate was probably about 2 o'clock-ish, the depth was probably about 2 o'clock as well, and the resonance was probably about 2 o'clock too, so all the twos there, but that would be set on mode 1. That, I don't think I'm doing a whole lot on the verse here. You know, I'm literally not touching a thing. I do have a bit of compression on this one just to catch some of those. The clean channel on the tremor verb can be quite spiky, so this is just taming some of that down a little bit and adding a bit more punch to the sound as well, so it can cut through a bit. Brit channel, not doing a whole lot again, just a tiny bit of saturation. Same place on the Miko 2, or we've shifted over ever so slightly. I might move that back. That shouldn't be there. And then again, I'm just giving myself a visual reference. So again, on the right hand side, let's turn those off. Same thing again. Brit channel, same deal. Bit of compression, just pushing up a tiny bit here in the 4K region, just on the right hand side. And let's have another listen again.
Will I ever get to where it is that I am going? Will I ever follow through with what I had planned? I guess it's possible.
Sounds pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that one. So the heavier sounds and the verse, definitely pretty close on that one, I feel. The intro, no idea. Not got a clue how they recorded that. I'd be fascinated to find out. Now let's move on to the next one. Now let's move on to one of my absolute favourite songs off this album and just generally, The Warmth. This, I feel, was one of the closest that I came to matching this tone. Now this will give you a good idea of the pitfalls of using Moises or an AI program to strip out the stems. If we go from the start here, and we'll have a listen to my version. It just loses all the whale sound and all the atmospherics and stuff, which is a real pain in the bum because it's all in this other category, and Moises gets a bit confused because Mike has such a wonderful use of effects. It thinks it's some other sound. It doesn't recognize it as a guitar. So it lumps it in with the other, which is where all the whale sounds and all the atmospheric stuff that Kilmore's doing ends up. So I have to strip that out, otherwise you would hear some of Mike's guitar being played and then it's not really giving an accurate representation of me recreating the sound, if that makes sense. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit when the drums come in because I feel it gives a bit more of a better representation. So here we go. I'm pretty happy with this one. What really threw me for the longest time was Mike talking about him using the Hughes and Kettner rotosphere on this song. And stupidly, I always just assume that's what you can hear in the left speaker, of that really watery kind of sound, which it's not that at all. I'm fairly confident, or pretty confident. And in my recreation of this song that I did a while back, I used my PH2 on just a really fast rate. And that's what I'm doing on the left-hand speaker. If I solo that. So you can hear it has that really nice watery sound to it. If I solo the guitar here, oh no, not the guitar, sorry, let me do the other. You can kind of hear in that speaker, it's quite hard to hear because of the way that Moises has pulled this apart. But you can hear that really kind of fast, watery phaser sound basically, which I believe is what it is. But then on this side, the right, I have actually, instead of using my Strymon Lex, which I could have done for this, but I actually used the Hughes and Kettner Rotosphere plugin by Nembridi Audio, which is awesome. It sounds really, really good. And this ideally would need to go into the front of the amplifier. This is technically coming after the speaker cabinet, so it's almost like it's in an effects loop. So it's not quite doing exactly what I want it to do, but I wanted to use it anyway. So I'm just taking some of the drive off because it's incredibly clean on that side. And so that is what I think he probably used on the other channel, because then when you hear him play it live, he only uses the rotosphere and it sounds very, very different. It doesn't have that watery warble that you can hear on the left speaker. And I imagine he does that because it's a lot easier just to kick that on than to fiddle around with the PH2, because you have to get it in a really specific spot for it to sound like that. And when you're live on stage and you don't have a lot to see by and you've got to start the song quickly, I imagine that would just be a complete pain in the backside. So I'm guessing that's why he uses the rotosphere live instead. And then again, I'm using the same kind of setup. Brit channels not going on, just a bit of saturation again. Using the compressor for this one and cranking the volume quite a lot, and then dipping out a lot of the high end on this. There's like a real high-end roll-off. It's not too bright at all, and you can see I'm dipping like a lot at quite a wide Q as well, at like 3.5k, and then dipping quite a lot of the mid-range again at 40, and again quite a very wide Q just to really tame some of those frequencies down. And then I imagine on the left it's the same sort of story, so yeah, not a lot going on there, some compression, and then yeah, dipping out a lot of that high end again and a lot of that mid-range. Again, whether, you know, it was mixed like this in the studio, I have no idea. This is just what I'm trying to figure out, how to kind of create these sounds. You know, I am not any kind of producer or mixer, engineer or anything. I'm just a guy in a room fumbling his way through all of these plugins and gear and trying to learn as much as I can on the way. So that is everything we've got for the kind of intro and the verses, which I think sounds pretty great. Let's have another listen. If I remember correctly as well, I actually recorded this on my neck pickup just because the bridge again was a bit too spiky. Watching him play this live on the Volume 2 DVD, he's using the Spruce archtop and is on his bridge pickup. So I don't know how they would have done this in the studio, but because there is so much of that high-end roll-off, I just found that the neck pickup was a lot kinder in that regard. It already has a bit of that roll-off anyway, and then I still had to dip a load of the treble too. So not 100% sure how they recorded that, but it's pretty close. In terms of effects, let's check my sheet again. So the PH2 is on mode 1, and the rate was at about 430, so really high. The depth is at 3 o'clock, and the resonance I had at 4 o'clock, so all quite high up there. And then for the RV3, the balance was at 9 o'clock, the feedback at 11 o'clock. Delay time is just back from 3 o'clock. So again, get that to sort of 3 o'clock, play along with the song, and you might just have to tweak it back slightly from there. And then that's on mode 2 again. So going on from there, then we've got, I've called it the chorus, but really it's the pre-verse, because the chorus would have a left and right track. The pre-verse is just straight down the center, and it sounds like this. So that again is exactly the same delay with the RV3 and then the phase 90. So we're taking the PH2 off and putting the phase 90 on. And again, that was just set bang in the middle at 12 o'clock. And let's have a look what I did on that one. So Miko 2 is the same. Tiny bit of saturation here, nothing else going on. Some compression again, whether it needs it or not, it might not do, but I just found that the 1176 really helps it jump up in the mix kind of thing. And then on the SSL, again, we're just taking out a bit of that mid-range and some of that high end again, and then using the tape machine again to add a bit more saturation into the sound. And I actually had to push up the gain on this as well. Again, I don't know if they would have done this in the studio, but it being around 9-10 o'clock, it was too clean and it has a real bite to the sound. If we listen again. You want some of that gain to give it that edge. So that again was pushed up to about 1 o'clock. So if you're just playing along to this track, I wouldn't worry about it. I'd leave it more on a clean sound because you want it fairly clean for the intro and the verse. But because I'm trying to get as close as possible to each part of these songs, that's why I had to just stick this on its own track and up the gain. Then if we jump over to the bridge part, because kind of everything is the same as this for the rest of it. This is using still the delay, but then we've got another PH2 part, which is on mode 2 instead. And the rate I had as low as it would go, so like 7 o'clock. The depth is at like 2 o'clock, and the resonance is like 3 o'clock. So the resonance is pushed up higher again to really get that kind of gnarly feedback kind of thing going. And this is how that sounds. So all of this stuff was now back on the bridge pickup. I can't remember if I did that on the kind of chorus section on the neck pickup or the bridge. It might have still been the neck pickup because of the high end that I'm taking out, but I cannot remember. But again, if you were playing this live or at home and you wanted to play along to it, I would just leave it all on the bridge pickup because you want it for the bridge part in the song so that it really gets gnarly when the PH2 and the distortion kicks on. So this is quite hard to compare because the PH2 in mode 2 will keep kind of going low and high as it changes the sound, and depending on where it was set and when Mike stomped on it, it might have been in a different part of its cycle. So they're always going to sound slightly different to one another because they're at a different part of their cycle. But then once the distortion kicks on, again, trying to compare these is quite difficult because they're going up and down at different rates, but you can hear they're pretty much in the same sort of ballpark, and it would change if the band recorded this again now. It would sound totally different. Or if they recorded it with all the same gear in the same place and all of that stuff, same microphones, it would still sound different because of the nature of that PH2. But on here, it's very much the same sort of thing, same microphone setup. All of this is the same. The SSL channel, again, just dipping some of the mid-range, and that's it. And then the oxide tape on each channel this time because I was too lazy to put them in their own group. And then it's pretty much the same on the cleaner sound as well. But then obviously the gain is backed right back off, so it's a clean sound. So it's like 9-10 o'clock on the gain. Same mic position, same stuff on here. Still using the compressor on the clean sound though, not on the distorted sound. The SSL, again, just dipping the mid-range, and then the tape machines on there too. And that pretty much wraps it up for the warmth. That should get you in a very good ballpark. And again, just awesome use of effects here. Such a great song. So let's go to the next one. When It Comes. Now, this is the one that made me buy the OC2 again to try and get more accurate with the sound. And I'll show you what my whammy with the octave down sounded like in comparison. So let's just take a listen to start with. So here's mine. So again, this is a difficult one to replicate because you've got to get the right part of the PH2 cycle. So you want it when it's kind of dipping down at its lowest to get you that real bassy kind of sound, but then get it right so it's just coming up as the track is as well. And again, I upped the gain on this one. So again, it was about 12:30, 1 o'clock-ish on the gain instead of being a very clean sound, because it really dirties up at the end. Like, let's have a listen at the end of it. It starts to get really gross. It's awesome sound. So the PH2 on mode 2 was actually rate at 7 o'clock, so as low as it goes, depth at 12:30, and the resonance was actually more like 4 o'clock. And then the OC2, the octave 2 is off at 7 o'clock. We don't want any of the 2 octaves down. That's off completely. The octave 1 was, I pushed that up to about 2 o'clock, so it's kind of diagonal pointing at the corner of the pedal. And then the direct level, now any picture or video I've seen of Mike's pedal board, his direct level seems to be set at 12 o'clock, but for me the sound was way too warbly. Like, the OC2 is kind of notorious for it not tracking very well, and I found I needed a lot more direct signal in mine. So the direct level I've pumped up to 3 o'clock, and it just stops some of that warbling. Still warbles a little bit, which is kind of what you want. That's kind of the unique thing about the pedal. It's part of the charm of it. But at 12 o'clock it was too much, and it was kind of mucking up the signal quite a lot. So that is that for the intro. And then on here we've got the tape, and then on here again just dipping some of that mid-range, but at 50 this time. And then I'm having to dip a ton at 250 here because there is so much bass that gets added into this sound with the octave pedal on. Again, I'm on my bridge pickup here, and it was still adding in a ton of bass. I had played around with the compressor, but didn't really need it in the end. Brit channel, again, same thing, just a tiny bit of saturation. And then the same thing on the Miko 2 plugin. So let's compare that to, so I've got a plug-in version here that I had to go with, and you can see it's like the exact same thing. Let's set that to the same spot. And this is going into all plugins basically, but it's really hard to find a plugin that is like the Tremor Verb, because on the clean channel, if you really pump the gain up, it gets a nice overdrive to it. Whereas everything else stays pretty clean, so it's hard to emulate it. But these things do exist. This is the Octava 82, which is quite a cheap plugin, and it actually sounds really good. You can do loads of other stuff with it as well. You can make it a drive pedal, raw synth, loads of different stuff. I'm trying to emulate what I did with the physical pedal, but the real tricky part is trying to get this. You can see I've jacked the gain right up here, and it's still, if I take this off a sec, just doesn't quite sound right, but then everything else is kind of the same as what I had it as to a degree. Anyway, let's have a listen with the whammy pedal instead. So it just doesn't really give that same flavour. It's not like horrendous if this was the only thing, which is what I used in my cover of it, and it sounds kind of just fine really. But to really get that proper OC2 sound, really, funnily enough, you need the pedal. Simple as that. And annoyingly, they are actually pretty expensive these days. I used to have one of these when I was about 18 and I sold it, which was really dumb. So I had to buy it back again. But going on from there, this part of the kind of pre-verse section, I always thought he was using a bit of PH2 in there as well, but because of how much the OC2 warbles about, that is what's actually giving that almost like phasery kind of sound, I guess. So let's take a listen to this.
It's coming around again. They're letting it out again. It's coming around again. They're letting it out again. It's coming around.
So it's, again, that sounds pretty similar to me. And then moving on from there, or let's take a look at all of this stuff. So I'm actually pushing up quite a lot of the high end there, dipping a lot again in the mid-range and taking out some of the bass. And then same sort of story here. So just dipping some bits and pushing some bits up. Not a lot going on here again, just a bit of saturation, and then the same spot on the microphone position. And the right-hand side, same again. Not doing anything on the EQ, the digital EQ this time. Pushing up just a tiny little bit of 2K, dipping some more mid-range again, and then dipping some lows just over 200 hertz. And that's that for that side. And then we come into our, so sorry, this is all with the bridge pickup, this song. And then this is taking the PH2 off and just leaving the OC2 on with, instead of that clean sound with the modern high gain, heavy distortion. And then for the verse, so now this is back to dialed down on the gain on the clean channel. So that's a sort of 9 o'clock again, 10 o'clock. And it sounds like this.
It comes abrupt and it feels like trading brains with an imbecile. For real.
So again, pretty close there. It sounds definitely in the right ballpark in there. Now, when I was playing this, I found I had to play right back at the bridge to get the right kind of high-end response from it. And even on here, so again, I'm using the compressor. So same mic setup. Again, nothing going on here, bit of saturation, some compression going on. And then again here at 3K, pushing some of that up just to get more of that high end going in. And then again, dipping the mid-range, but at 300 this time. And then on the right-hand side, same thing, same mic setup. Same on the mic pre, bit of compression, and then the same pushing up at 3K and then taking some of that 300 out. And then this is all going into one big group, and that's where my tape saturation is on as well. Now, in terms of pedals, this has got delay. So the delay, the RV3 is balance at 9, feedback just back from 10, delay time at 1 o'clock, and that's on mode 2. And then the PH2 is on mode 1 and the rate is at 1230, the depth at 2 o'clock and the resonance at 4 o'clock. Now, after that point, we go into the pre-chorus. And that part sounds like there's not really much room sound going on. It's more the direct sound of the guitar cab. But when we kick into the chorus proper, have a listen to this. It definitely sounds like it opens up again and that room sound can be heard. So have another listen from back here. And kicking on some PH2 there to add that little bit of spice in the chorus. So all I've done here is I've literally got the room set up to not be active here, and then when it hits here, it becomes active. Again, it doesn't sound as extreme as something like Privilege, but it's definitely there. You can hear everything gets a bit harsher, and it just it just sounds like so much energy kicks in. And again, if we listen to, so there's nothing going on here until it hits this join. But I was kind of lazy about it. I didn't add the drums and the bass and everything into it this time because it takes so much time and it's not quite right still. But it gives a nice bit of energy going into the song. And again, this has got the tape emulation, nothing else is turned on there. And same mic, that is actually off, that's not doing anything, just a bit of saturation. A high pass and a low pass, pushing up a lot in the sort of 2K region again, and then dipping out a lot of that mid-range again, like classic kind of new metal scooped sounds really, and then dipping out some of the 140 here as well, adding in just a bit more of the mid-range, more around almost 1K-ish, and then dipping some of the higher, harsher frequencies. And then same on the right, but this EQ is not active this time, dipping the mid-range, dipping some of the bass, adding a tiny bit of 2K, and then same thing on the high and the low pass, and nothing going on in here, and then the same mic up again. And that is kind of it for When It Comes. So a decent amount of effects pedal use here. Some really cool riffs in this song. This is such an underrated track. I absolutely love it. But let's move on to the next one. All right, now it is Stella's turn. Now, this from a long, long time back, I can't remember when the comment was made. I'll try and dig it out and put it on screen. But someone had commented on, I can't remember what video it was, that they remember reading that Stella was intro and verses was done on a Fender Strat with 9-gauge strings. And I thought, okay, let's give that a go. And they are absolutely right. Check this out.
Meet me in outer space. We could spend a...
Pretty darn close, that, which is very cool. And I'll show you what's going on here. So again, same mic settings. Nothing going on here apart from a tiny bit of the saturation again, a little bit of compression and cutting quite a lot of the lows out, and then a ton of the highs again, like really battering that high end at 5K with quite a big Q, taking out 13 dB there, and a little bit of bass as well. So this was on the neck pickup of my Fender Strat with 9-gauge strings on it through the clean channel of the tremor verb, and boom, there's the sound kind of thing. But do have to lop off a lot of that high end as well. And then again, the tape machine is going too, but it's not hitting too hard, so it's not adding a ton of saturation or anything. And then once we nip over to the chorusy part, let's have a listen to that. Again, I've tried to get a sort of room sound going on. Again, my sound kind of loses a bit of that energy, and it feels like the bass is kind of being a bit lumped out of this one as well, because the guitar and bass blend a lot on this song, especially when the OC2 gets kicked on those single note parts. And this is very similar to everything else. So I'm actually dipping a lot of the high end on this one with another EQ. I've got the tape machine going on. There's a lot going on in the left-hand speaker of this one that's quite hard to replicate, again, with kind of drums and bass being stripped out of kind of my version a little bit, and that room sound coming in. On the right channel, same mic setup, same as everything going on here, and then I'm adding some more at 2K again, dipping that mid-range, and then adding some bass here, which is where I think Moises has kind of taken out some of the bass guitar and added it to the guitar signal, which is not quite correct, I would guess. And then the left channel, same thing. Again, on the Brit channel, I'm having to add some of that 110, and then pushing up the high end again, dipping some of that mid-range, and then actually dipping a bit of the bass at about 200. So the OC2 I'm kicking on here has the same settings as When It Comes. So the octave 2 is all the way off, octave 1 is about 2 o'clock, and the direct signal for this one I actually did leave at 12 o'clock instead, because there's so much distortion going on and stuff. It just kind of helps to add to that weight of the sound, and you can't really hear the warbling as much. And then when it goes into the first part of the second verse, we've got this. So we've got a flanger in the right speaker, and then not in the left speaker, that's giving it that sort of movement sound. And it definitely sounds like it's a room mic that's picking up the reverb on this part. I just used the RV3 on one of the reverb modes, and I could have emulated this with the room sound as well, but just felt like putting the RV3 on for this bit. So the balance was at 9, feedback was at 1 o'clock, delay time 1 o'clock, and it was on mode 11. And then the flanger that I'm using, I think Mike used a BF2 on Make Yourself. And so I have got it set. The manual is at 5 o'clock, the depth is at 12 o'clock, the rate is just over 12 o'clock, and the resonance is at 10 o'clock, which gives it that nice kind of shimmery movement sound. And then I think in the bridge for this song, it's probably the flanger again, although you could get away with using a PH2. So let's listen to just the right channel. And then Mike's guitar. So mine's maybe a little bit more swooshy. You might be able to get away with a slightly faster rate there, but where mine's mixing with the reverb pedal instead of just being a room sound, that might make a difference as well. Let's have to listen to the left. So that's just the reverb, and then Mike's. Some nice string bends there, which I don't think I'm doing. No. So bending your strings there will give more of that movement kind of sound to it as well. But it's such a lovely reverb that they've got going, or, you know, from the actual room that they recorded it in. And that's pretty much it for Stellar. Those are the bits that I recorded anyway. Like I say, on the bridge, pretty sure it would have been the BF2 in there as well. But if you have a PH2, I would set that on a lower rate, and that will give you the same sort of sound. Right. Clean. This one has all the effects. It's just got everything chucked at it. So let's start with the intro part. So again, this is using my bridge pickup, and on the left hand side, got a flanger. On the right hand side, phase 90. So these two together combine to make a really, really cool sound. So let's listen to the right of Mike's. Hard to hear, but it's definitely in there, the phase 90. And then the left, you can hear he's got the BF2 resonance cranked, so it's making it almost sound like a robot. So the settings that I used for that, so for the phase 90, the dial is at like 10 o'clock, pointing at kind of the left hand top corner of the pedal. The BF2, the manual is at 5 o'clock, the depth at 1 o'clock, the rate is just over 7 o'clock, and the resonance is just back from 3 o'clock. Then once we come out of the clean sound, oh, sorry, let's have a look at this. So this is going through the group with the oxide tape. Again, same mic up. All of this is the same. Little bit of compression. Not a lot going on here, just dipping some of the bass at 240. And I don't know why that's on. That can come off. I'm not using that at all. And then left on the right hand side, same thing again. Brit channel, not a lot going on. Bit of compression, and again, nothing but just dipping a bit at 240. Then once we kick on the distortion, so you can really hear there whether that's the flanger on the left-hand side that's really gnarling up the sound again and has that like robot-like quality to it. If we listen in Mike's one. Really cool sound. And then I'll do my left track. So trying to replicate that same kind of sound there. And on the right hand side, we've still got the phase 90. And then over here. You can hear it pulsing around as well, which is quite cool. And it just gives this really nice movement to the sound in both sides. And as we go further on, that's when I think that room sound comes in again, especially Kilmore's part. You can hear a ton of reverb. There. Very cool. So that sounds like it's, again, going into that room and creating that big reverb. So I have, you'll see back here, there's nothing going on in the room there, but when we start going to the actual power chords, see the room then kind of comes alive. So if we compare the two, and then again, a PH2 part comes in there. So that'll be the same sort of settings again. So rate at 7 o'clock, the depth at like 1 o'clock-ish, 2 o'clock-ish, and then the resonance again up at about 4 o'clock, 3 to 4 o'clock, something like that, depending on your guitar and your pickups. And if we have a listen here again, you can hear those other effects have been turned off now. And then on mine. So once those sort of power chord slides come in, the flanger and the phase 90 get turned off, so you can kick on the PH2 instead. Then these are all set kind of the same sort of thing. So again, tape machine, just a low pass filter on there. Same mic setup, Brit channel, just boosting the 110 again. So probably some bass that's getting lumped in here again. High pass and low pass filters, cranking up the 2K again, and then dipping that mid range, and then taking out quite a lot of 200 as well. And then a tiny little dip there just to get rid of some of the harsher stuff. And then same again on the right hand side, 110 being pushed up, high pass, low pass, pushing up the 2K again, 2.1, dipping that mid-range. Oh no, sorry, I'm not actually dipping any mid-range on that one. And then just a bit of 200. And so from there, we go into our verse. Now on this one, I did use my Strymon Lex, and it sounds like this.
Day, everything was fine, 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 until roundabout 9:15, suddenly found myself in a bind,
Now the rotosphere there is a little bit smoother. Mine, you can really hear the rotor blades swooshing around, which you can change to a degree with the mic distance maybe, but the rotosphere just sounds a little bit more rounded. I don't know how else to explain it, but they are again pretty comparable if we listen again.
Day, everything was fine, 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 until roundabout 9:15, suddenly found myself.
Mine maybe has a bit more of a warble to it because of that, the mic distance, I think it is. You hear a bit more of a swooshing kind of sound to it, but still pretty close. Again, this is going through the same thing that the intro was, so all of those settings will be exactly the same. And then when it gets heavier again, trying to emulate that room sound again, and it's not quite there. It still sounds nice, it still sounds good, it still sounds in the ballpark, but it just doesn't have that life to it that having all these guys playing in one big room and capturing that through a microphone, you just can't replicate that kind of thing when you're stripping out tracks and trying to fake it, basically. And again, we start with that big PH2 part. Really cool sound again. And then before we go back into the verse, PH2 kicks on again on mode 2. And then that kind of cycles round again before we've got the bridge part, which this is such a cool riff. And again, when I was trying to do this with my whammy, it wasn't quite right. And I actually had to use a wah pedal to get it to cut through the mix. Whereas with the OC2, again, that warbling effect that you get from it kind of helps it to poke through. So let's take a listen. So I actually thought that was a cocked wah at first. It really sounds like a wah pedal, but it's just the OC2. And again, that's the same setting, so nothing on the octave 2, 2 o'clock on the octave 1, but again, the direct signal was pushed up to 3 o'clock. Let's have a listen again. And this time I'm cutting that room sound out as well. So it's just the more direct sound. And anytime that kind of happens when I was trying to recreate these, it always sounds closer to the actual sound rather than trying to fake a room sound, which I guess is not really surprising. So again, all the settings will be the same on here, but with the bridge, I put it on its own track. But same mic up, nothing going on here. Again, just a tiny bit of saturation, bit of compression, just dipping some of the 200 on this one, some of the low end, and then having to do some dancing with the digital EQ as well here. So that's that mid-range that's kind of poking through, and then dipping some more of the low end and some of the kind of a little bit of the mid-range there again as well. So maybe there was a wah used and that's what created this. I'm not 100% sure, but this certainly got the job done. And then again, the tape machine on there as well. And then when things get heavy, again, that room sound is just coming off. It's still the same settings on the OC2. And then all of this stuff will be the same because it's on the same track as the chorus part. So there's a lot kind of thrown at clean effects wise, and it's pretty cool. I love this track. And let's just have a listen to the wonder that is Brandon Boyd for a minute. Have a listen. What a voice. Anyway, let's go on to our last track. So the last track that I'm going to go through, and of course it's got to be, is Pardon Me. And this again, the intro is really hard to tie down. It sounds like there's either room sound going on or it's multiple takes that are going over the top of each other with perhaps different settings. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty confident it's a flanger and not phaser. And I'm on bridge pickup again, and I had this set to, where are we? RV3 delay, there's balance at 9 o'clock, feedback at 11 o'clock, delay time at 2 o'clock, again pointing at the number 7 on the mode chart, and it's on mode 2. The BF2 I had manual at 5 o'clock, depth at 10:30, rate at 2:30, and resonance at 9 o'clock. And here is what that sounds like. You can hear on the studio track, it's got more of a wow, wow, wow kind of sound going on, which again, I'm really not sure how they would have recorded this. If it is the sound bleeding into the room that's giving that that almost feedback kind of sound. It was the same with Consequence. I had a little go at recreating that, and there are points where the rate of it, the speed of the, again, which I believe is a flanger at the beginning, it almost like trips over on itself, and it's really hard to replicate. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on here. You can hear that mine sounds pretty similar. Let's listen again. It just lacks that wow, wow, wow kind of sound to it. But the thing is, if you push the rate up too high, it does something entirely different. And if you push the rate, if they put the depth up too high, then it starts to fall apart again. So I'd be very intrigued to learn how they recreate or created that sound initially. It's such an amazing sound that's really hard to replicate. But on here, again, I'm just using the tape machine. Mic position's the same. Nothing really going on here again, apart from a bit of saturation. Compression, quite a lot of compression. And then high pass and low pass. And then again, I'm having to dip a lot of that high end. Not doing anything on the mids this time or on the bass. And then the right hand side will be very similar. Not a lot going on there. Compression, and then same thing. High pass, low pass, dipping out a load of that high end, and then nothing else. But really, really hard to replicate that sound. It's kind of in the ballpark, but it's not 100% there. Then when things get heavy, this is probably the most over-the-top room sound on the whole album, I think. So let's have a listen. But for some reason it's slightly easier to replicate because you can kind of push it with EQ instead of it all being about this kind of room sound that's all encompassing. Like the one I struggled with the most was Privilege. That just sounds like it's coming from the whole spectrum, this huge room sound, whereas part of me seems it's a loud room with a lot of like again going on, but it's more contained to the left and right speakers. Mine might even be a bit too bright in places, but here is what is going on here. Again, the tape machine cutting off quite a lot of that high end, bringing up some of the mid-range again, because we're probably trying to emulate some room mics and mic overheads and things like that, dipping some of the higher end there. And then on the left, same sort of mic position, just a bit of saturation. And on the SSL, pushing up some 3K, nothing in the mid-range, and then actually boosting some at 190, and then a low pass filter there. And in the right, same mic up again, just a bit of saturation. That 110 is not actually doing anything. And then low pass, high pass and low pass going on here, pushing up a lot in the sort of 2.6, but quite a narrow Q. And then actually having to push up a lot of mid-range here at 1.3. Again, probably because we're trying to emulate not a really direct sound, it's the direct amp and a load of room sound, but then dipping at kind of 190 here. And that gives us that big sound, and then it's going into the room mics as well, which again, we've done some EQing on that, smashing it with the 1176, and then the same Music Club reverb. And then it would be those kind of settings throughout the song then. Absolute classic Incubus song. Again, that intro kind of leaves me a little bit stumped, whether it's a room sound or kind of multiple takes with slightly different settings on the flanger that is doubling up in places and giving that sound. I'm not sure, but having those effects combined would definitely get you in the ballpark. And then I found that the flanger coming after the delay sounds more like it than the other way round. If you just have a PH2, I would set that at sort of rate 1 to 2 o'clock, depth about the same, and then the resonance you can sort of play around with, whether you want that to be sort of 2 to 4 o'clock, that kind of thing. And that would be on mode 1, and that's what Mike uses live anyway. He's never used a flanger on his board, as far as I'm aware. But there we go. Those are all the examples, so let's get back to the rest of the video. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, given the limitations of my environment. Once again, having physical microphones in an actual room with 5 guys playing all at the same time is just impossible to replicate. I feel modern music has lost so much energy and uniqueness because people don't really record like this anymore, but that is a discussion for another time. Let me know if you have the same gear as me and are excited to try it out for yourself. I hope you enjoyed this one, my friends, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!